Frost beneath the flame. The winter wind swept across the small Washington state town, biting through the layers of coats and scarves. Ellie pulled her jacket tighter around her as she walked down the desolate street. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of more snow, and the bare trees lined the sidewalk like frozen sentinels. She moved through the town like a ghost, her presence unnoticed, her thoughts buried deep beneath the surface. Ellie had always felt invisible. Growing up in this cold town, with parents who expected her to follow a path she had no desire to walk, she had been taught to bow, to bend under the weight of expectations and shame, to hide the fire that flickered inside her. It had been a slow process, that silencing. As a child, her voice had been loud and full of laughter, but over the years it had faded, smothered under words meant to mold her into someone she wasn't. Now at 21, she felt like a shell of the person she used to be. The scars of silence etched deep within her soul. There was something inside her, though, a promise, a fire she couldn't quite control. It flared at odd moments, burning hot enough to remind her she was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than numbness. But then the frost would settle in again, freezing over her thoughts, her emotions, her desires. Desires she had never been able to speak aloud. The memory of those desires, of what she had lost before she even had a chance to grasp it, haunted her as she turned onto the next street. There, in the distance, she saw her. Kara. Kara was standing outside the coffee shop, the same one they used to visit after class back in high school. Her fiery red hair, always wild and untamed, stood out against the muted backdrop of snow and stone buildings. Ellie's breath caught in her throat as memories flooded back. Memories of quiet conversations, of stolen glances that held far too much meaning, of a touch that lingered just a moment too long. But none of it had ever surfaced. Ellie had never spoken, never let herself break free of the silence that kept her bound. She had been too afraid. Afraid of the frost that covered her heart. Afraid of what it would mean to let Kara in, to admit what she felt. And so she had stayed hidden, her feelings locked away in a frozen corner of her soul. Kara looked up just then, as if sensing Ellie's gaze. Their eyes met across the street, and for a moment, Ellie felt the fire flare again, burning through the frost. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold reality of who she was and who she had become. She had been shaped into a void, walking a broken line between the truth of what she wanted and the lies she told herself to survive. Still, Kara smiled, soft, familiar, and full of the warmth Ellie had always been drawn to, the same warmth that had terrified her back then. Ellie hesitated, her feet frozen to the pavement. She wanted to turn around, to walk away before the memories could overwhelm her. But something inside her, that fire that refused to be snuffed out, pushed her forward. Slowly, cautiously, she crossed the street. "Ellie," Kara greeted her, her voice carrying the same gentleness it always had. It was like stepping into an old dream, one that had lingered in the back of her mind for years. "It's been a while." "Yeah," Ellie replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "It has." They stood there, awkward and quiet, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them like the fog that clung to the air. Ellie could feel the frost creeping back in, threatening to freeze her in place, to keep her from saying what she had wanted to say for so long. But Kara didn't seem to notice. She gestured toward the coffee shop. "Want to grab a coffee? It's freezing out here." Ellie nodded, following Kara inside. The warmth of the cafe hit her like a wave, but it did little to melt the ice that had formed around her heart. She wasn't sure why she was here, why she hadn't just turned and walked away. Maybe it was the way Kara had looked at her, like she still saw the girl Ellie used to be, the one who hadn't been afraid to speak, to feel. They found a table near the window, and Kara ordered them both coffee, just like old times. As they sat in silence, Ellie's thoughts swirled, a storm of emotions she couldn't name. "I missed you," Kara said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her eyes met Ellie's, full of the vulnerability Ellie had never allowed herself to show. "Back then, I always thought there was something between us, but I could never figure out why you pulled away." Ellie swallowed hard, the fire inside her flaring again, pushing against the frost. She wanted to speak, to tell Kara everything, to admit the truth that had been buried for so long. But the words wouldn't come. The chains of fear, of shame still held her tight. "I was scared," Ellie finally managed, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to deal with what I was feeling." Kara reached across the table, her hand resting on Ellie's. It was a simple touch, but it sent a jolt of warmth through Ellie's body, melting the ice just a little. "You don't have to be scared anymore, Ellie. Not with me." Ellie's heart raced. She had spent so long hiding, so long denying what she felt, that the idea of being free, of being herself, seemed impossible. But here was Kara, offering her a way out of the shadows, a way to let the fire inside her burn brightly for the first time. "What if I don't know how to be free?" Ellie whispered, her voice barely audible. Kara smiled, her hand squeezing Ellie's gently. "Then I'll help you figure it out. We can take it slow. But you don't have to hide anymore." For the first time in years, Ellie felt something thaw inside her. The frost that had covered her heart began to melt, and beneath it, the fire burned stronger than ever. She wasn't free yet. There were still scars, still chains that held her back. But for the first time, she believed that someday she could be. Ellie looked down at Kara's hand resting on hers, the warmth of that touch seeping through her skin and settling deep inside her chest. She wasn't used to this, letting someone in, exposing the raw, hidden parts of herself. Her whole life had been about control, about maintaining the walls she had built to protect herself from the shame and the fear that had shadowed her every step. But sitting here with Kara in the quiet comfort of the cafe, those walls felt less sturdy. They were crumbling piece by piece. "I don't even know where to start," Ellie admitted, her voice soft but tinged with a fragility that surprised even her. She had buried this part of herself for so long. She wasn't sure how to pull it back into the light. Kara's thumb brushed gently against the back of Ellie's hand. "It doesn't have to be perfect. Just be honest with me. With yourself." Ellie looked up, her eyes meeting Kara's, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. She had always been so afraid of rejection, of what it would mean to show someone else the messy, complicated parts of her. But Kara didn't look away. She didn't flinch. Instead, she held Ellie's gaze with a calm patience, like she was willing to wait as long as it took for Ellie to find the words. Ellie took a shaky breath. I've spent so much time hiding," she began, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I thought if I ignored what I felt, it would go away. But it never did. I've felt trapped, like I've been living someone else's life. And with you back then, I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" Kara asked gently, her eyes never leaving Ellie's. "Of you seeing me for who I really am. Of feeling what I felt for you." Ellie's voice cracked, and she bit her lip to keep the tears at bay. She had never said these words out loud before. "I didn't know how to deal with it, so I ran. I pushed you away because I was scared of what it all meant." Kara's expression softened, a mixture of understanding and sadness crossing her face. "I always wondered what happened. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, or that you just didn't feel the same way." Ellie shook her head. "It wasn't you. It was me. I was scared of everything, of how much I wanted to be with you, of how much I wanted to stop pretending to be someone I wasn't. But I didn't know how. I still don't really. Kara's hand tightened slightly around Ellie's, her warmth a steady presence that grounded her in the moment. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We can figure it out together. Ellie blinked, the weight of Kara's words settling into her heart. Together. She had never thought that was a possibility, that someone could be willing to walk this confusing, painful path with her. But Kara was offering that. Offering something real, something solid, after years of Ellie's life being built on shaky ground. I don't want to hurt you again, Ellie whispered. I don't want to keep running. Kara smiled softly, her thumb tracing small, soothing circles on Ellie's hand. Then don't. Stay. We don't have to rush anything. But I'm here, Ellie. I'm not going anywhere. The words hit Ellie harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life feeling alone, isolated in a world where she couldn't be herself. But here was Kara offering her a way out, offering her the chance to finally breathe. Ellie took another breath, deeper this time, and let it out slowly. I don't know what's going to happen, she said, her voice steadier now. But I want to try. I want to stop hiding. Kara's smile widened, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. That's all I've ever wanted. They sat in silence for a few moments longer, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. But it wasn't heavy. It felt like a release, like something inside Ellie had finally cracked open, letting in the light for the first time in years. She wasn't free yet. There were still wounds that needed to heal, chains that needed to be broken. But for the first time, she felt like she wasn't walking this path alone. Kara pulled her hand away gently and reached for her coffee. Do you still like caramel lattes? She asked with a playful grin, as if they were slipping back into the easy banter they used to share. Ellie smiled, a small laugh escaping her lips. Yeah, some things haven't changed. As they sipped their drinks, the warmth of the coffee seeped through Ellie's chest, thawing the cold that had settled there for so long. She looked out the window, watching the snow fall softly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world didn't seem so bleak. There was warmth here in this cafe, in Kara's presence, in the quiet understanding that lingered between them. Maybe she wasn't free yet, but someday she would be. Someday she would be free.